Hello, I'm David, Security Research Engineer at Pentest-Tools.com. In today's video, I'll walk you through a practical penetration test scenario showcasing how you can efficiently use Pentest-Tools.com to discover, exploit, and report vulnerabilities. By the end of this session, you'll have a clear idea of how our tools and features can help you streamline your pentesting workflow from initial reconnaissance to reporting. First, let's create a new workspace so we have a clean start for this engagement. We want to get alerted whenever a high or critical finding is found, so we are going to set up an integration with Slack. As one can see, we have multiple integrations to choose from, such as Teams, Jira, Discord, Venta, and even generic webhooks. We are going to create a new Slack integration to send a message to the Security Notifications channel. Now, we want to go to the notifications section and create a new notification which sends us a message each time a finding with a high or critical risk level is found. Using the Teams section, we can also invite people to this workspace to collaborate with. However, for today, I'm going to test this network alone. We have as a scope any Acme Incorporation related asset. We were only given the main domain of the organization, healthpoint.pentest-ground.com. We are going to only be dealing with external targets in this pentest. However, we can always use a VPN agent to remotely scan internal targets using Pentest-Tools. For more details about how our VPN agents work, check out the video to my right. Let's start enumerating all the subdomains using the Subdomain Finder. We found confluence.healthpoint.pentest-ground.com and exchange.healthpoint.pentest-ground.com. Healthpoint.pentest-ground.com seems to be the website of the company. Looking through it, we found an interesting URL to an S3 bucket. Let's scan it using the cloud scanner. Even though we didn't do this now, as it is easier to start a scan from the user interface in our case, it is worth mentioning that we can also start a Pentest-Tools scan with any tool using our API. We see that the cloud scanner finds an interesting object called secret. Let's check it out. We see that the secret is a list with certain employees of the organization. Let's use Network Scanner using the light mode to get an idea about what's behind all the targets we discovered so far. We see that confluence.healthpoint.pentest-ground.com is a Confluence instance. It might make sense to use a deep network scan to find out more and figure out if this can become an initial access point. We can also see a Microsoft Exchange server. So again, it makes sense to use the deep mode of Network Scanner. We want to use deep mode as this scanning mode scans more ports and uses more vulnerability detection engines, such as OpenVAS, Nuclei, and our proprietary Sniper engine. This helps us as we will have more coverage of possible vulnerabilities. The main domain is a WordPress website. Pentest-Tools robots are scan automation flows that chain specialized tools for various use cases. Using robots, one can build custom tools for vulnerability assessment and human-led pentesting sequences. Users can build their own robots or choose from the default ones. Pentest-Tools provides us with a robot specialized for scanning WordPress targets, so we are going to use it. It turns out that Confluence has a critical vulnerability, so let's check it out. It's CVE 2022-26-134, a critical remote code execution vulnerability. If we wanted to report this vulnerability as fast as possible, given its level of risk, we could generate a report of this particular scam. We can either just generate a report with all the findings in PDF, HTML, JSON, CSV or XLS format, or we can generate a docx pentest report. However, we want to generate the report at the end and use findings from all our scans and analysis to generate it, so we'll skip this for now. The next step for many is to search for a POC on GitHub. We already know this POC works and it is not malicious, but always inspect the exploits before you run them to make sure they are not harmful. Let's run the exploit. Looks like we got a shell as the Confluence user. Now let's try to escalate our privileges. We'll use limpies for this. First, we'll transfer it to the target. To do this, we first start an HTTP server on our attacker box. Then we want to simply download a file on the target machine . And now we run limpies. We see that we can run vim as sudo without requiring any password. Vim can be abused to spawn a shell, and as we can run it as root, we can spawn a root shell. Let's do that. Now, as root, let's enumerate the machine. Let's look for interesting CSV, XLS, and doc files. We found an interesting file called techadmins.csv. Let's look into it. We see a list with 2 employees. We'll take a note of them for later. Let's move on to Exchange. This is vulnerable to the notorious ProxyShell vulnerability. Let's get a reverse shell here as well using Metasploit. We got a shell as the NT system administrator user. Finally, let's move on to the last host. The WordPress robot did not find any interesting targets. However, now that we have a list of admin users, we can use the Password Auditor to try to get administrative access to WordPress. We'll use the usernames found in the CSV file to password spray the target. Now that we have the user word list, let's move on to Password Auditor. We'll use the Xeto net 10 million passwords password list and the custom username list. Bingo! We found valid credentials. Let's try them. Great! We got admin access to the WordPress instance, which means that we can also get remote command execution quite easily. Let's do it using the theme customization technique to get a reverse shell. We see that we got remote code execution as www-data. Let's use limpies once again to try and escalate our privileges. We see that the cron job exists for the user root, running a script we have write access to. This is an easy way to get a root shell. we'll modify the script to spawn a reverse shell. Now we start a listener and we wait. Finally, we got root access to this machine as well. Let's start working on the report now. We can go to the findings page to list all findings and choose which to export or add new ones. It is good practice to redact critical information such as passwords in a report. Even though the report is confidential, it's better to take precautions to avoid leaking such details. To do this, we are going to edit the finding and only show part of the password, so the client can validate that the finding is real. We also have some findings related to privilege escalation methods that were not found using Pentest-Tools. To keep reporting efficient and avoid scattered data, we can add these findings manually. First, let's create a template for these findings, so it is easier to add them later. Let's add the privilege escalation findings we found manually and the manual exploit we found for WordPress. First, we want to go to the reports section. There are multiple templates available. We are going to just use a default one. If we need them, we can create new templates that are super customizable. Next, let's move on to the engagements section. Finally, we go to the white label setting. Here, we can change the logo that will be used for the report and also for sending professional, polished emails directly to the client. For now, we are going to keep the Pentest-Tools logo for our report. Now, let's generate the report. First, we want to filter the findings so we can provide the client with a clean report. We want to keep only the most important findings. Finally, we want to get an editable pentest report that makes it easy to edit the content while keeping formatting clean and professional. Pentest-Tools.com generates this as a customizable docx document. At this point, we can select the template to be used to generate the report, the engagement to which it's assigned, and the author. This is also the step where we decide how to group the findings and select filters to determine which findings should make it into the report. We click Enter and then we download the report. The report is also available in the Configurations Reports section of the page. That's it. You've seen that Pentest-Tools.com provides a solid foundation for efficient, human-led penetration testing, doing the tedious, time-consuming work involved at almost every step, from Reconnaissance to reporting. But what makes our day, as the team behind the product, is to see how your logic, unique insight, and real-world penetration testing experience truly elevate the process. We build Pentest-Tools.com to amplify your abilities and know-how, not replace them. Thanks for watching, and if you're curious to see what else you can do with Pentest-Tools.com, check out the website for in-depth guides on network and web application security assessments.